and you go for it,
Okay.
and we'll try to do the share.
Okay. So I was motivated to, share what I've been doing for the last 50 years or so, based on two things. First of all, Alan saying he never knew anybody who worked for a corporation. Most of my clients work for corporations. And second, there's, it's not clear what a copywriter actually does. So I want to share a little light on that, spread a little light, and sort of talk about the journey of how I went from a creative writing major at Pomona to an advertising career. So I was a creative writing major, and like a lot of folks at that time, I was seduced by the films that were being made. All of a sudden there were, the old Hollywood was replaced by a bunch of very creative stuff. Easy Rider, John Cassavetes, The Last Picture Show, stuff like that. And as a writer, I thought, well, why in the world would I want to just stick to writing things on paper when I can involve sound and action and the element of time? And so I immediately decided I've got to go to film school after I graduate. And so I was there, and I was originally I was in Venice. I lived in Venice on the canals, and my roommates were David Ward, Elliot Cowan, and Peg Winship, and Chuck
Oh.
Williams. All of these are Pomona people, and I I originally was very interested in documentaries. Elliot was making documentaries, but then people I knew started selling screenplays. And I thought, well, wait a minute, this is a better idea. Let's just sell a screenplay and get rich. And now I'm going to start sharing a bit. Sharing is not turned on, send request. Okay. And now I'm going to, so how do I share now? Um, I want to share. I want to share.
I got a request, and I said allow, so you should be able to.
Okay. And now I can't find I can't find my presentation. Um,
So
okay,
you
here we
have
go.
to, okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna play from start. Um, so can you see that?
Nope.
How can I make them see that, Tony?
So go down to the bottom, hit share, and it should show you what's on your screen now. And what you want to do is have made your PowerPoint big before you do that so that it's big on your screen.
Okay, well I've got desktop one. Let's try that. Um, Microsoft PowerPoint. Ah,
Okay, but first at the bottom, hit the share button.
okay. Allow a workplace to share. Okay. All right. All right. Share, right? Okay.
Mm, we're still not
Not,
seeing it.
no, I've got it may not be able to record the contents until it is quit and reopen. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Lori, this autobiography that we were talking about was something that I emailed to the group before you had joined the conversation. So I didn't send it to you, but I will send you that so you know what we're talking about.
Um, so I'm going to try again to share. Allow, allow. Okay. Desktop one. Here we go. Down here. Share.
Yay.
Okay, that's the presenter view. I want to show the slide
Ta-da!
Okay,
page.
now you can go over to yeah, that's it.
So you got a picture of a movie poster here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a movie poster for a movie called Angel Unchained, and it was written by Jeff Fiskin. I don't know if anybody else in here knew Jeff Fiskin. He was another Pomonaite, and his story was that he had a relative in the film industry, and the relative got him an appointment with the producer who worked for Roger Corman, who was specialist in B movies at that time. And he said, "Well, uh, Jeffrey, what kind of movie do you think you're going to write?" And just out of the blue, had to come up with an idea. Jeffrey said, "Well, I want to make a version of the Seven Samurai as a biker movie." And they said, "Great, you're on." Sorry, now I've got this. Sorry. Okay, turn that off. Sorry. Um, and so he sold it, and the movie was made. And I thought, well, this is pretty easy. And then now David sold a movie. This is called Steelyard Blues, and if you can find this movie, and it's sort of hard to find, but it's interesting to watch as a Pomona person because there's a lot of influences you will recognize in there. There's a lot of echoes of hanging around in the Virginia Dare winery, a lot of echoes of hanging around at George Lindelof's place. And the producers of this were Tony Bill and Michael and Julia Phillips. And I'm not sure how he hooked up with them, not through an agent probably. But it was not a success. But then he went on to write The Sting with the same producers, and of course that was a huge success. And so again, he's starting to he sells things, and I thought, well, okay, this looks like a shooting fish in the barrel, so I'll become a screenwriter. And so I changed my concentration to screenwriting, and I got my MFA with the thesis, which was a screenplay. And what I didn't really understand was that screenwriting, and probably Barry knows something about this, is as much about smooshing as it is about the actual work. You've got to be able to get along with people in the industry. And I was terrible at this. I would put sort of write the script and say, okay, I'm done. And I would just give it to somebody and say, here it is, you want it. And most people didn't want it. And the closest I ever came was that I had a script that I had written, which was it was about a couple who go on a backpacking trip and get involved in a rabies epidemic. And it would be appropriate today because it was kind of a apocalyptic climate change kind of thing. And I got a call from ICM, which was a big agency at that time. They said, we'd like you to come in and talk to us. And I said, great, I'd be happy to come in. And I went in, and they offered me a mimosa, which I didn't accept because it was pretty early in the morning. But they said, well, we'd like you to meet your agents. This is so and so. He's your theatrical agent, and this is so and so. This is your agents for television. And I said, well, that's great. But can we talk about my screenplay? And they said, well, we can, but we already sold the screenplay. It's all done. And I thought, well, that's great. It was, and what it was there was a studio who had a contract to do a certain number of movies of the week, and they had chosen mine as one of the movies. But then it went to the executive producer of that group, and she said, "I've already seen this screenplay," and I turned it down, and I'm not going to read it again. And it turned out that Tony Bill of this triumvirate producing team had, without my knowledge and permission, had presented the script. And so I'll never know whether I didn't sell it because it was a lousy script or because she didn't have confidence in him as a producer. But that was kind of the end of my screenwriting career. But as I was doing this, I was after I got out of UCLA, David Ward took the money he had from selling Steelyard Blues, and he bought a big house in Topanga with his wife, Chris Atwood, and they lived there, and it was a fixer-upper. So they had a lot of things that needed done. So I lived with them for about a year, paying my rent by doing odd jobs, painting, fix up, and Chris had a friend who was a creative director at a department store. And so I met her one day, and she said, well, while you're waiting to sell your screenplay, why don't you come in and do some copywriting for us, write some catalogs for us. And so that's what I did. And since I didn't ever sell a screenplay, that's kind of how my career evolved for the next many years. And this what I did a little bit about that career. I enjoyed the challenge of writing a small description of a product that would help people decide whether they would buy it or not. But I didn't really think of it as, the idea of selling it, as that was something that was an end goal to me. And with a little natural progression, I got a job as an advertising manager in another store, the Broadway, if anybody remembers that. And we published a big sale catalog, and the advertising VP, the marketing VP said, Otis, let's go take a drive today. And so we got in the car on the first day of the sale, and we went around to several stores, and we'd go in the store, and we would see people standing in long lines with all holding a product that I had advertised in my catalog. And I said, well, wait a minute, I'm selling things. The things I'm doing make a difference, and I kind of like that. And so that was the first light bulb that went out in my head. And I did that for a little bit longer, and I got another job. I was the advertising director of a company that sold tools by mail. It was called Santa Fe Freight Company, and a version of that survives today in the Harbor Freight. They were a direct competitor of ours, and Santa Fe Freight eventually went out of business. But the idea was we would send a mailer to people who might be interested in buying some tools, and we'd show a lot of tools at ridiculously low prices. These were all things that had been made and imported from India and Japan. They were quite cheap at that time. And so they would call a phone number to order them. And then when they call, we put them on with a telemarketer who would try to sell them some more tools. So I would always know if I had a success because I'd go in, the overflow phone calls would go to the reception at the front desk. And I would come in, and she would normally say hello to me as I went by. But if she was too busy to say hello, I knew I had a hit on my hand. And the way I found out whether it was a hit or not, I tried all kinds of mailing lists. I would rent lists of people who were janitors in department stores, people who were materials handling engineers, things like that. And it was interesting to see who responded to what. And I was very successful at putting that together. So I kind of began to like, I wasn't getting any traction with my screenplays, but I was getting people to pay attention to what I was writing by buying things. And that felt good. And so I basically became a copywriter who is a person who in a relationship, a marketing relationship, writes the words and potentially designs or directs the design and directs the strategy of the piece. And so that's what I basically did. And the specialty that I had was direct mail. And it was an interesting time in the advertising and history when we all had things that looked like this next to our mailboxes, a basket full of junk mail that we were going to deliver or to go through, most likely next to the recycling bin, and throw away almost all of it. So my challenge was to not be the piece that got thrown away, but to be the piece that was opened. And this era was triggered by the fact that we suddenly had very sophisticated access, very granular access to information about the audience. We could know a lot about the people we were mailing to. And so we could design things that were much more likely to succeed because they were going to the right audience. And this went on for about 30 years. And then came the internet. And of course, everything shifted to the internet. And so there was hardly any more direct mail. So we all maybe had baskets like this. None of us have them anymore. So here's the kind of thing I did. And the strategies that went behind it. So this is a piece, 1995. It's to introduce the Isuzu Trooper at a time when most people really didn't know what an SUV was. And so we had some audience information that said our likely buyer was somebody who is interested in outdoor sports, is probably male, and likes to tinker with things. So the idea was to get them to appreciate this as an important tool for their outdoor activities, and to test drive it and tell us what they think of it. Satisfy their ego by making them understand their opinion is very important. And you see that little picture of the Swiss Army knife at the bottom there. Once you submit the test drive information, you get the knife. And so the packaging for this, this was right after we started being able to buy tortillas in Ziploc bags. It was a brand new thing in 1995. And so we found the company that made the Ziploc bags, and we had them make us some that would fit our mailing format. And I use those when I would go backpacking. I would use the empty tortilla bags to keep things like a wilderness permit or a topo map dry if it was raining. So, we all use those for that. And so this was a subliminal message about, you're a backpacker. We know what that's about. And then when we get inside, here's a brochure, and the fold of this brochure is the same as the fold of a topo map that you would get from the USGS when you went on a hike. And so again, subliminally, we were telling people we were with them on their interest in the outdoors. And here are a bunch of features of this new product called the SUV that we're going to want you to evaluate. And so you look at that, and then here's the thing expanded to show the more of it. I think this is the other side of it. And then after you reviewed this, then you're going to make an appointment for a test drive, and then you're going to have to fill out this questionnaire, this very official looking questionnaire that is behind the other elements, and you're going to send it in, and you're going to get the Swiss Army knife. So this is a very successful package, and it sold a lot of Isuzu Troopers. Here's another thing. There used to be, remember Time Life books, perhaps. I remember Rodale Press. There were a number of people who were very, very big marketers who played in the space where they would create very, very large visual packages selling a subscription to a magazine or a book club of some sort. And so the package sort of served as a teaser for what you could get by buying the product. This creating these packages became a very specialized and prized job for a copywriter. There were several people who would command extremely high fees, like $50,000 in 1990 money, to create one of these packages. And I, after a little bit of work, got to test against these people, and I didn't ever reach that level, but this is a very successful package. And this is selling something called Great American Recipes, which is a program where you get recipe cards in the mail every few months, every few weeks, and that you get them in a bill, and you keep getting them until you stop. So it's a subscription, an opt-out subscription. And we knew about this. Our audience was primarily female. They like to collect things, and not especially affluent or well educated necessarily, but the collecting things was very valuable to them, very important to them. And when I dug this package out, I realized that it's kind of, it's kind of Trumpian. A lot of the things I did at this time were suggesting that there was something you used to have, and somehow it's gone, and we're going to help you get it back. And so in this case, we were talking about food, nostalgic food. We have this picture of the kid eating fried chicken, and we're going to provide these recipe cards to you that help you learn how to make that fried chicken and other great recipes you used to make. And here is more of the package. There's the brochure inside. There's that thing up the upper left is the response card. There's a little yes sticker you're gonna pull off and stick on a reply card and send it back. And there's a thing I'll talk about later called a lift note at the bottom center. And this is what the package is. The brochure and the package is opened up all the way. We would refer to this document size as a bed sheet. I put a pen in the middle of it so you could see how big it was. It's 24 by 36. So if you had 2 or 3 of these things, you literally could, make a bed sheet out of them, sleep in the streets with it, I guess. And here's the recipe that goes inside. And again, it's talking about nostalgia. Remember, man, good food made the best time you ever had, tastes and textures. We live in such busy times, but how could we ever have gotten away from such good, honest foods? Now you can bring them back, and the way to do that is to buy a recipe package. And so we had at that time there was a sweepstakes. there was a control. Control is the package that's most successful, most profitable when mailed over and over again. And the sweepstakes had been unbeatable. And that was the idea was, well, you need to respond to see if you won something. And it got a great response because everybody was curious if they won something. But the problem was then you started sending them recipe cards and that cost you money and they didn't pay for the recipe cards and they ended up discontinuing. So this got people who really did want the recipe cards. And so it became the new control. Now, here's another package which is sent to businesses, small business owners. Um, this was we know about small business owners that they are highly egotistical, very short on time, probably a mix of male and female. And this invites them to come to a seminar which you're going to use to value your business. And not because you want to sell it, you're curious how much it's worth. And if you the business model of this was it was actually sponsored by a business broker. So if you decided to sell your business, you wanted to sell your business after coming to the seminar, then they could be your broker and help you sell it for a commission. So the letter, this is a very simple package. I don't have the rest of it, but the letter begins by complimenting them. We're in the middle of the hottest mergers and acquisition market. That's why like many of the people who attend our business valuation seminar, you may have already received an offer and for far more than you ever dreamed your business could be worth. And so people are saying, well, wait a minute, I haven't received an offer, so I'm kind of doing a takeaway here. I'm complimenting in the first paragraph, then I'm saying something, I'm assuming something about them in the second paragraph that may not be true. But in the third paragraph, we say, but what if the offer is too low, though it may seem high? What must you know to negotiate the sales process? Asking these questions you would want to have. And the answer is, well, your partners, your family, and your own peace of mind deserve your answers to these questions. That's why you should make plans to attend an upcoming event in your area. Then they would have, these were all geographically specific. And so people would come to the seminar based on what they, based on the date that they were assigned. And this is a lift note. And the story of a lift note, it's also called the publisher's note, because in the early days of direct mail selling, the idea was I think these were Reader's Digest pieces that the publisher who is not in the marketing department stops by as the piece is getting ready to go to the printer, and the copywriter and the creative people show him all the pieces, and he says, "This is fabulous. This is great work. We're going to get a fantastic response to this." And the marketing people say, well, maybe so. If we get a 2% response, that would be really good. And the publisher says, I can't believe that. I can't believe people won't respond to that. So he writes a note. Maybe it might be hand typed, it might be handwritten, to stick in the package that says, look, you've got to buy this because here are the reasons. And it was called the publisher note because it came from the publisher, but it's also called the lift note because it lifts response. And so this was the lift note from the Geneva package, and it has the case history of somebody who was about to sell their business for 3.2 million, and once they came to this seminar, they ended up selling it for 9.2 million, which was, why would you not want to do that? So this was again a successful package, and the lift note I think helped. Here's a couple of other things I'll show you. The business to business market is interesting and fun to market to because you generally got a pretty good budget, because if somebody buys, they will spend a good amount of money, so you can afford a fairly nice package. And this was sent to valued resellers who sell a variety of business brands and do not sell or were inactive in selling Xerox, which was at that time primarily a copier company, but trying to make a transition to other kinds of machines. And so this was, I don't know if anybody ever remembers the Things of Science kits we used to have as kids. Anybody ever get those? No? Okay, well, I did. I was very enamored of those. There were little kits, they'd come once a month and they would have a science experiment inside, and they were blue. So this is a knockoff of that. And so it's got a science experiment. In this case, it's got a magnifying glass. And underneath the magnifying glass are instructions to use this to light a fire in paper. And then we explain in the elements of the mailer that this is a process that was invented by Xerox, and it's the basis of our Xerox copier, our laser copier. And we'll give you, if you want to find out more and make an appointment with our salesperson, we'll give you this free science book, which is a set of more experiments. And then here is another one for Isuzu. This is going to owners of fleet trucks, and this is about 2000. And again, Isuzu is introducing a new product to the U.S., which is their cab over truck. And at that time, if you think about the way that delivery vehicles are manufactured, typically a trailer, and then there's a tractor attached to it. And the idea of this was to integrate the two and have more storage space over the bed of the cab of the tractor of the truck, which made the thing shorter, which meant you can save more and it would be more fuel efficient and you get more stuff in here. So the idea is you send this to someone in the food service industry, says 500 gallons of tomato paste enclosed, and then you open it up and we see, of course, we exaggerated about the amount of tomato paste. Here's one can because you really need an Isuzu truck to carry 500 gallons of tomato sauce. And then we had a gift certificate, a spaghetti dinner at probably Olive Garden or some such when you responded and asked for more information, a test drive. So that's the kind of stuff I did, and I did it for quite a while, and made a living. Put my family, my kids through college, etc. And I've got if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I've also got a few slides from a copywriting course I used to teach. So I'll pause here for any comments. Yes, sir.
So Otis, could you describe the division of labor? I mean, I assume all of these programs were done with a team. And were you directing the team? Were you conceiving of the product? I mean, what was the division of labor in getting one of these things to completion?
Well, it depends. Actually, I'll show you. Hop ahead to my next slide, which is partly the answer to that. The Depending on the size of the project and the size of the client and the company and the budget, it might be all done by me, working with a freelance designer, because I'm not a designer. I can't make the pictures like the ones you saw, but suggesting to the designer what the picture should look like and how it should be organized. Or it can be done through an advertising team, an advertising agency, which means you've got a creative director who directs a copywriter, a designer, and production people. And that's what happens at bigger agencies. And I've done both. I've been a creative director in an agency, and I've done projects all by myself independently. But I wanted to show this. This is from my course, and it's the elements of a creative brief. And every agency works with something like this. The other parts of the team, Alan, are the account people, and they bring the project to us. They're the ones who have the client, and their job is to make money for the client, so the client will keep paying them. But they also need to make the client happy. So there needs to be a happy medium where the creative people are allowed to execute a creative assignment, but the account people are comfortable or should be comfortable with the direction that's being taken. So what happens is everybody uses this thing called a creative brief, and it has basically the same questions, somewhat not always formatted exactly the same, but taking these things through the steps. And the account people write these things, and then they turn them over to the creative people, and the creative people work from the creative brief. And if the account person comes back and says, "Well, I just don't like this," they're not allowed to say that. They've got this because the creative people followed the brief, and they can say why they didn't like it, and maybe there's an opportunity for tinkering. But that's kind of how the division of labor is handled. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, good.
Oh, Otis,
In-
I'm sort of fascinated by this because it looks like you get to use this really fun combination of a lot of different things, including the psychology of using those heuristics that we were talking about earlier, the taking advantage of the built-in human predispositions to approach being convinced by tricky things with the artistic talent that you had, using both design and words. And now I know more about, I still have my wicker bin sitting right over here. I could show you, full of all these advertisements that I get. But I just think it must have been sort of fun because they're very specific projects and you could go see the result of what you did.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about this is you get a report card in every project because you know how you did and whether it made money and whether it got the desired response. And so you can't be a bullshitter. And one of the things that's fun about it or challenging about it, depending on how you look at it, is that people don't want to receive this mail. And so you've got to convince them to open the package and in spite of themselves, I've got to look at this. I'm going to throw it away, but I got to look at it first. Then you open it up and you see a message that resonates with you because we've done the research to understand what might resonate with you.
Otis,
Yes, sir.
I want to just piggyback on what Leslie was talking about because what came to mind for me as you were going through this, which is fascinating, is there was a lot of social sciences, social psychology research that was coming out around this period. That really supports a lot of the things you're doing in terms of taking advantage of human perceptions and the way human beings process information and react to things. Were you looking at any of that research? And if so, I'd be interested to hear more about it.
Sure. Well, we had, if they had done formal audience, we relied on, either the client or the account people to provide us with data on the audience. And if they had done research and, in a metric that created indexes for people, we would have that information. So that Isuzu package, we knew that this audience was indexed very high for outdoor sports and indexed very high for interested in mechanical entrance, for instance. So we wanted to hit those buttons. Other things we know is what other kinds of offers these people have responded to. It was very important if somebody is mail responsive, they're more willing than the average bear to open a package they haven't asked for. They find it entertaining, and so we mail more to those people.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Actually, I think I mentioned in an earlier presentation a book by Jacob Ward called The Loop, where he's talking about the psychological underpinnings of how the internet works and how social media work. And he references a lot of these studies that look at, for example, risk taking, how people assess risk in different ways. And a lot of this research that was coming out was really, from my understanding, was being used by advertisers to help them target audiences just in the way you're talking about. So it's kind of interesting to think about the research aspect of this that I think maybe underpins some of this stuff.
Yeah, and today it's gotten more and more sophisticated. There's not a lot of expensive direct mail that's sent out today. Most of the money goes into internet advertising. But if there's an ad you see frequently online, those ads are constantly, they do regression analysis constantly, testing those things against different audiences. Change a word here or there, change the price. So it's constantly being fine-tuned for the best result, whether that be the number of responses or the dollar amounts raised by the response.
Otis, if you were doing sort of international advertising kind of thing, how would you know that, or who did you have working for you that would know that you weren't offending somebody by a particular picture or wording of a message or something like that because of a different culture?
Well, this was almost entirely U.S. based. I did have a few things which were for companies that were had international presence. I did a lot of work for Autodesk at one point, and they had sales offices in in different parts of the world, and they would let us know if something was potentially offensive. And there was well, also there's a separate thing. There's a whole bunch of uh, restrictions on privacy in Europe that in the EU that we don't have, and so we had to worry about those. But you would write something that was you thought was neutral, and they would say, "Oh no, you can't do that. That's incredibly offensive to a person from Hong Kong," and so you couldn't do that. You couldn't use that promotion. So I didn't know that stuff, but I had people who would tell me.
I had a friend who, I still have a young friend who just quit working for Nike, but part of his job for part of that time was working with Asian countries and doing the research with other people to find out, no, no, don't use that word as your brand for this product, or don't say it this way because of all of those problems.
Yeah. Well,
Otis,
I've got an example here that Douglas will appreciate because you lived in Hawaii. At one time, one of my clients was a insurance company in Hawaii, a Hawaii-based insurance company, and we had this promotion, and the we did some research, and the guy I was working with as an art director came up with this package, and the title of it was Eddie Would Go, and it was Eddie would take advantage of this, so why don't you? And that was incredibly offensive. And I knew it was offensive. And the client looked at it and said, "This no way," because the rest of us, Eddie was a daredevil surfer who would go out in any circumstances. And so Eddie would go as a kind of a sanctifying thing. That this is, it's a very maybe you could talk about this a little bit, Doug. That it's not commercial at all. It's the opposite of commercialism, right?
You know, it was my most revered and treasured bumper sticker is says Eddie would go. But
Yeah.
he was a longboard surfer who I don't know if I already told you this story, but he was a longboard surfer and he went out on the Hokulea or one of the other replicas of an ocean-going canoe, and they got into trouble. And he had his board, so he said, "I'll go and get help." And he got on his longboard and paddled off and was never seen again.
Oh,
So
wow.
they have an annual Eddie Aikau uh, Memorial Longboard Championship every year in Waimea Bay on the North Shore and they don't even bother having it until the sets are over 25 feet. So it's quite spectacular. So yeah, I mean, but it was very. He was a real iconic figure in Hawaiian, at least surf culture.
Otis, I have a question and a quick story. The
Yeah.
question is, did you ever use focus groups to test any of your work?
Yes.
And was that a key element in which you ended up coming
It
out
was
with them?
not. It was not a it was not used that often because focus groups were expensive, and we would. Isuzu. I don't know if anybody remembers a campaign for Isuzu called "Stay Between the Lines." It was for a vehicle called Rodeo, which most of these are not made anymore. They've evolved into something else. But the agency, Goodby Silverstein, did a lot of focus groups to test messages before we went out with them, and we were part of that. We being the advertising agency I was working with, and so we got the benefit of that, but it was because there were very big budgets. And generally, we didn't have the budget to do our own focus groups from scratch. We had to piggyback on other information, but it was very useful if it was available.
Okay, so here's my quick story. I was in a presentation one time at Disney by Joe Roth, who was running the Disney studios at the time, and he was explaining to a group of us how the keys to marketing a movie that was about to come out. And it was very interesting to me because he said, and this only applies to sort of mainstream big budget kind of movies. It doesn't apply to art films that can build over time. But basically he said that the opening weekend of a box office of a movie, 90% of the time determines its ultimate earnings over time. So how it does in the first weekend is absolutely key. And the thing that determines the opening audience in a movie is the television advertisements that air the week before the movie hits the market. And those ads are absolutely critical to how that movie performs in that first weekend. And he used an example of an Eddie Murphy movie. I think it was called something about a gentleman. And it was not a normal Eddie Murphy movie. It was a departure from his comedic movies. It's a more serious movie. And he pointed out that the advertisement for this did not connect with people's expectations for what Eddie Murphy should do. And as a result, the movie flopped. So I was really hit me how important advertising and that particular window of advertising for a movie is to its shelf life and its performance at the box office.
Yes. We had one of the things we had to help us was all these things were constantly testing against each other. So if we had a new product, we'd send out, or the client would send out multiple direct mail packages, different offers, different price points, and they would find out, the audience would tell them what was successful. So it's a similar process to that, and it would be, that example is sort of like having sending out one version of your creative and never testing anything else and having it not be very good. So I had this class I taught. It's called, the name of the class was Copywriting That Gets Results, and I taught it in various extension programs at UCLA and San Jose State and such over several years. And I also got asked to teach corporate writers, corporate communication people, a variation of this, and that was called How to Make People Read What You Write. And the idea of that is, well, if you're selling, like if you're writing an instruction booklet for a product, um, you want people to read it so it'll reduce the number of customer service calls you get, which will increase returns on the product and cost you money. So you want to write in such a way that people will read the instruction manual. I would talk to those people about ways to do that. And again, it's some of this is a little bit obsolete because we don't use words as often on their own as we used to. But it's still useful to know about this. And one of the mantras I would use was, writer is a salesperson with a typewriter, which is now evolved to a salesperson with a keyboard. The idea is that essentially a copywriter is doing the job of a door-to-door salesperson who once again knocks on your door and wants to sell you something which at this point you don't think you need or want. And so how does that person work? And there were a lot of people who had books and theories and seminars on how to do this, and basically if you're trying to get somebody's attention, you want to sell them something, these are the steps you'll go through. You get them not to close the door on your face. You establish that they should be interested in something. You show them how your product can do this, and then in case they're thinking about not buying it, prove that this is a better way than any other way they could get what they want. And I had a client who was a sales trainer. Companies that have salespeople, they put them through a lot of training, constant training with different systems to keep them motivated and not depressed, because it can be very depressing to be constantly calling people or knocking on doors and having most of them not respond to you. And so it's a similar thing to what I just described. Just it's got 7 steps instead of 4 steps. And the difference, like I would say to people, is that the salesperson has a prospect in front of them and can tailor the process as they go along, and you don't. So you must, in your advertising, anticipate where the conversation might go, and then handle those questions and objections in a way that just when they're looking for the answer to something or they're about to say, well, I can't use this, then you respond, well, here's a reason you can. And again, that's all based on the research, what we know about these people, right? That they probably will respond to something that's going to save them money, or they will probably respond to a message about family security of some sort if you're selling insurance. And so if you focus on that, you'll be more likely to get through to them. And one of the things it mentions objections up here. I didn't really talk about objections, but the lift note, I showed that one from the Geneva package. Objection is something that somebody raises to, well, this sounds interesting, but no, I can't do it because so and so. And often that's a way that they're trying to shut the door on you. So you need to anticipate the objections they might have and respond to those before they ask them. So that in that case, somebody is saying, well, I don't think I need this product because I'm not going to sell my company. And we say, okay, that's fine. Here's somebody who, thought they were all set, and all of a sudden they got much more money than they would have gotten. So that's the answer to that objection. And these are buying motives that, again, from that Roy Chitwood course, and desire to gain, fear of loss, comfort and convenience, security and protection, pride of ownership, satisfaction of emotion, and these do play out pretty well. If you look at any product or service, there is some mix of these things that's being sold, and with the Trumpian stuff, very very much, what's used to appeal to MAGA is number two, the fear of loss. Somebody's taking stuff away from you. They're cheating you. They're being unfair to you. We're going to help you get it back. And that was looking at things that MAGA does, that Great American Recipes package, which is kind of the same thing. It's very benign. And we are trying to create this unique selling process, which is a benefit the prospect gets from your product or service that cannot easily be provided by the competition. And the classic USP, M&Ms melt in your mouth, not in your hands. Well, they were developed during World War II to put in ration kits because soldiers would be in the South Pacific, sailors would be in the South Pacific, and a candy bar would turn into a puddle by the time you opened it. But you put M&Ms in there, and you they won't melt, and that was just a product fact. But a smart advertising person turned that into a slogan. And again, the example with Colgate, that it had properties that made your breath smell better, and most toothpaste at that time didn't really talk about that. They just talked about how your teeth got clean. And that looks like the end of my show, so I will click to exit and answer any questions. How do I do that? Click to exit. Okay, do I do that? Click to exit.
It's
Okay.
end share, yeah. End
Stop sharing
share.
PowerPoint. Okay. And now I'm stopped down back to Zoom.
At the bottom, click end share or stop share.
Okay, all I have
maybe
now is a little, I don't have my window anymore. Maybe if I do this.
Okay.
Um,
Well, your share is up in the right-hand corner.
Can you click
here we
your
go.
PowerPoint?
Here we go.
Click
Here we go. I
your
got it. Share.
Hit escape, and that should make this smaller, and then you should be able to see what you're doing.
Okay. Now I can turn my video back on. All right.
Now
So
you
that's what I got.
You're still sharing.
Stop sharing.
Yeah. There.
There we go.
I'm lucky to be in the presence of so many tech savvy people.
Well,
Hey,
let's not
Otis.
stretch things.
That was a very cool presentation.
It was.
Hey, Otis, I found a deep irony in the whole thing because at the very beginning you were talking about marketing yourself as a screenwriter. And you said, well, it's all schmoozing. And that, as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with Ry Cooter one time. And I said, you just done such a great job in producing whatever it was I was talking about. And he said, oh, producing's not the job. The job is getting the job to produce. He said that was Ry Cooter said that, and that's what screenwriting is like too. But ironically, you ended up spending your career doing exactly that thing, essentially, except on a large scale.
Right. And in fact, my ideas about screenwriting were wrong. That when you finish a screenplay, you're not done. It's not a completed work of art. It's something that relies on a bunch of other people to get made and and then get to an audience and find that audience. So it is absolutely right that you have important connections with other people in your industry that I was kind of trying to avoid. So it ended up like it should have.
So I thought this was absolutely fascinating. Um, and I'm not trying to sell any products, but but I have other things I want to sell. So Tuesday, for example, a little group of us from the Friends Committee on National Legislation, our advocacy group, are meeting with Mike Thompson, our representative, and we are trying to sell him on some policies. And he's persuaded Democrat. He's kind of a centrist and a bit of an old fogey like us. But do you have any tips on persuading either Congress critters or voters that from what you've done, how can we carry this over to I've got to write up some little document to hand to him.
So is he a Quaker?
No, he's not.
Well,
But
it's not. This is not a Quaker question because I found that some of the most difficult selling I have to do is to Quakers. If I'm involved in some kind of a Quaker activity and I have a point of view that I think is important and I hope other people will adopt it, you have to be very careful about that. I think respect is an incredibly important part of that. Um, but as far as selling to Congress people, I have they have just a tremendous amount of you know conflicting stuff, and and they've got to have a sense for what's going to satisfy the largest number of people and offend the fewest number of people. And
so
I was the chair of my
staying.
local Democratic committee until recently, and we had this one assemblywoman who is our assemblywoman for this area, and she's in a fairly conservative district, and we would always have these policies that we would like to have her adopt, like something about an aggressive policy on more ways to get for farmers to get paid to use recyclable plastic. And she was very reluctant to do that to back that because some of her farmers were concerned that it would cost them too much money. So she would not back that. So, that in her calculus, she wanted to be a Democrat, but in order to satisfy these Republican farmers, she had to, walk a different line when it came to their hot buttons.
So this guy is in an interesting position. He was challenged on the left by a billionaire young guy who's never done anything, has no track record, but it claims to be far left, although he's a billionaire baby, nepo baby, and that was the guy who made. So it's now he made the runoff in the California's jungle primary. So on the one hand, he has this challenger on the left, but he has to win over the Republicans in our district, which is a district that has a fair amount of rural people. So his response, for example, on the recent bill to stop funding military support to Israel, he abstained. He was one of 10 abstentions, thereby offending everybody. And so,
Laurel? Oh, I'm sorry.
so he's in a kind of interesting position. But just generally, any tips on writing? I write letters to him all the time, and
Laurel, I was going to say, while Otis was explaining this, I was thinking about Quaker situations, but other political advocacy things. And I think the most important thing that I heard Otis say was that the difference between copywriting and door-to-door salesmanship is you have to anticipate ahead of time what the objections are going to be and be ready with your answer and maybe even present it before they do. And so I was just thinking that was a really valuable thing to say, okay, they're going to say this. So before they even say it, you say, now you might be thinking this. However, that's one of my best takeaways.
I love it. Thank you.
That
You know,
is good.
when I was thinking about something too when you spoke about anticipating the psychology of the person you're trying to convince. What is it they're looking for? What is it they want? And it occurred to me that I had a unique situation at Disney because theme park visitors are a very specific audience for buying things. And Disney makes a lot of money selling people uh, things, products in the parks as part of their park experience. So I sat down one day and wrote a document to try to lay out what was the psychology behind the decision a theme park visitor would make to buy something. And this turned out to be a very well received document by the management of Disney. But among the things was one of them is you want to buy something because you want to extend the experience you just had on this ride beyond the ride. Another one is you want to buy something because you want to have a tangible memento of the fact that you achieved something. You achieved some aspirational goal. I survived Space Mountain. And that led to, I'm not saying this caused this, but that correlates well with the photographs that are taken in these thrill rides at a given moment when everyone's screaming that you can buy afterwards. That is an evidence of you having achieved something, some aspirational goal. Another one, I mean, so I listed all these different psychological motivators to buying things in the theme park. And the document got a lot of attention in the company and seemed to be well received.
Well, also with Disney people, I've noticed, nobody hardly ever you hear about somebody who goes to Disney and spends $1,000 on their visit and never talks about it. They come home with regalia to let you know that they did it, and they wear that regalia everywhere. If you go to their house, they got Mickey and Disney are there, Mickey and Minnie, and or, the stuffed animals or whatever. Extending
Look at the longevity of the Mickey ears hat. I mean, that has had an amazing lifespan. I mean, I remember as a kid getting when they used to sew your name on the front of the Mickey ears hat, and actually that and the Mickey mitt, which is the hand thing that looks like Mickey's hand that you can put over your hand, have a lifespan of like half a century of people buying those.
Otis, I'm curious to know whether Elliot Callan ever made any money on his documentaries.
No, he Elliot went into a religious sect soon after that, and it was I don't know a lot about it, but it was based in Mexico, and it was very focused on chanting, and he was very happy, and he married somebody who was also in the group, and then he died. He's not with us anymore. He died about 10 years ago. Still in that sect. But a documentary filmmaking is fun. It's a whole different thing. I actually for my you have projects at UCLA, and my project two was a documentary as kind of a day in the life of George Lindelof. And I sort of just hung out with a documentary camera, and I shot, people working on cars, playing poker at his house, and so on. All these kind of pointless conversations and ridiculous activities, and I was very fond of it, and it's I've got the original negative and the which hasn't been spliced together. It's two reels, and I've got the audio, which is on magnetic tape, which is probably not usable anymore. But I saved it; it's still around, and that was a lot of fun. So
Was
I was
Lindelof
seduced by
actually
I
a
was seduced
student?
by film writing, screenwriting.
You ought to digitize that,
I should,
Otis.
yeah. And I could say it cost about $20,000 to get it, get it in a final version that could be digitized. And
Oh
if I
my
had
God, how come it's that much?
Well, it's a very technical process, and it probably would be cheaper today. You just shoot the whole thing on video, and there you'd have it. But putting film,
Is the film
transfer.
edited?
Yeah, it's edited.
Well, I don't think it'd be anywhere near that much.
Maybe not.
Was Lindelof a student at Pomona,
He
or did he
was.
just hang out there?
he was a student. I don't know if he ever graduated, but he was a student, and his notoriety came from working for the grounds crew at Scripps College. So he was always driving around in service vehicles with his pipe and his beard and being a character.
You know,
Okay,
Otis,
first,
you mentioned Roger Corman in the early part of your presentation.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I know you know this, but Roger Corman, who made a ton of money making low budget B movies, but he was also a great training ground for directors who turned out to do great work because they learned how to work quickly and efficiently and to deliver projects on time. He was a stickler for meeting budget and meeting schedules. And people like Spielberg and Lucas and a lot of these other people cut their teeth working on Corman films, or just completely garbage ideas. But they learned the craft of filmmaking very very effectively under Roger Corman.
Absolutely. And that was, here's someone here. What has we got here?
Okay. So what I've got here, being a hoarder of things, I kept my alumni directory from 2006-7, which I'm glad I did. It says George Lindelof graduated class of 67, and he was the maintenance technician for the city of Carpinteria.
There you go.
So,
There you go. I didn't. Good job to graduate, George. Yeah, and Roger Corman. I mean, he was, he was called B movies because we used to have double features, right? And you wanted to go to the theater and you wanted to see two movies, and the second one didn't have to be very good. It just had to kill the time, and so he was a master at that, just like a B side on a single, Tony.
Otis, I was always mildly offended that you changed your name from Alan to Otis. I thought Alan is a perfectly good name. Why would anybody do that?
I always hated the name Alan.
I'm
I
sorry
think
to hear
nothing
that.
personal. I just don't like the word Alan. Nothing personal, Alan. And I am Otis Allen Maxwell, and my father was also Otis Allen Maxwell, and my mother thought there was nothing more logical in the world than to call us both Allen. And so she'd say Alan, and we didn't know who she was calling. And so as soon as I had the opportunity, I said, I'm not going to be called Alan anymore. Sorry, I'm done. And I hadn't had this realization when I got to Pomona, but as soon as I left, I had the opportunity to repurpose myself. So that's when I did it.
There's the town right to the south of us is called Otis,
Yes, there
and
is. It's got a very prominent cannabis store there.
that's right. And they have great T-shirts and a whole advertising campaign called Notice Otis.
There
So
you
there you
go.
go.
There's also a lot of dogs called Otis. Otis is a very popular dog's name.
Oh, yeah, Milo and
Hmm.
Otis.
Hmm.
We're still recording. We're probably are probably done, right?
Well, you guys can be the judge of that. I enjoyed it, Otis, and I'm sure we'll all think of a lot of questions later. I think next time we're about ready to do the history of music with McEntee, unless somebody else wants to pop in. I'm always looking for volunteers to educate us. So if anybody here wants to volunteer, or even better, uh, enlist somebody else, we've got people lined up. We have Peter Stevens, Dink Frazier uh, are doing something, and there's some others. They're coming up, but they're not. They're not in the immediate future, so we could fill some spots in a week or two, or in a week or so, and or we could just meet here and speak among ourselves.
Tony,
Tony,
is Dink still in Ireland?
Yeah, I think so.
I had an idea about maybe how to fill the time if people don't want to take on the responsibility of coming up with some big official presentation. I think this group reads really interesting books. And sometimes you'll read a book that has a whole bunch of ideas that you think are worth sharing. So maybe people could very casually give sort of book reports, if you know what I mean, or even things on a certain topic.
Does
Reminds me
anybody
of,
have?
we spent weeks on Moby Dick years ago.
Yeah, does anybody have a specific title in mind?
Well, I just was reading this book that I think I mentioned before called Humankind, which was written by this Dutch guy. And I don't agree with all of it, but what was interesting to me was there were several ideas in it um, about things that we, especially our age group, believe because they were presented to us as either things that had happened, as front page news things like the murder of Kitty Genovese. Or remember, I think I referred to the Stanford experiment where there were prisoners and prison guards. Well, it turns out those things, he totally debunked those two things. Those things were
Really?
yes, they were totally misrepresented and not true, or not true to the degree that they were claimed to be. So I was
Wow, that
thinking
is a
that,
I'm
really famous
crushed.
one.
yeah, so I'm
I,
thinking, so even if you just wanted to present ideas you came across where you sort of said, either in literature or in nonfiction, so you said, wow, that's pretty important. That's pretty impressive. We could talk about that.
Yeah,
I just came across.
I like that, Leslie. I think that's great because I've often thought I'm reading a lot during the week, and I'll read something and I'll think, boy, I wish I had a group to talk to about that, and I don't have a group other than this group. So I was thinking, if we just if we come across something we read that we think is worth talking about, just make a note of it and bring it to our sessions, and that would be fodder for some good conversation. But I've really enjoyed these sessions where people just talk about their lives and their experiences, and we kind of your talks, Alan, where it just keeps going and going because there's so many things that it brings up, and I think that's a really good example of what this group can turn into.
I just ran across an idea today that I hadn't thought of at all. And I thought it was really, maybe it was overblown, but this guy was talking, it was a lecture about demographics, and he was talking about the fact that all the baby boomers are going to die, and that this was a huge cultural generation, as important in its own way as the preceding generation, although not in more in cultural things than in actual war. Uh, and he was making it out to be a very big deal. I think my response was, you have no idea what's going to happen. But anyway, he was
It'll
making a
be a big
big.
deal to us.
Well, no, it will be nothing. We'll just be like Socrates says. It'll either be we'll go to heaven and meet a bunch of our old buddies or enemies, or it'll be nothing, which is more likely.
Hey,
Um,
by the way, while I'm thinking about it, there's a film out right now in the theaters, which is a filmed version of the play Hades Town. And if any of you get a chance to see it, I highly recommend it. It is a terrific filming of a theater piece. The theater piece, it was filmed in one take, live in a London performance of Hadestown. And not only is the show phenomenal, but this film is great. And if
What
you can
is it
see
called
it,
again?
it's called Hadestown.
But where do we find the film?
It's in the theaters right now.
It's in the theaters.
I
Okay.
saw it on Saturday, and
It had really good box office for a theatrical film too. I
yeah,
mean,
it kind of came out of nowhere, and it had 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So Lori, my girlfriend, and I went and saw it in the theater this weekend, or just this last week. And if you can catch it before it leaves the theater, it's fabulous. The music is great, the performances are amazing, and the show itself is great. But it's another one of those. It's like Hamilton. The filming of the theater experience is so beautifully done and so effective that it's really powerful. So I highly recommend it if you can see it in the theater.
Helltown?
Hades.
Well, I know. What do you think Hades is?
It's about
Helltown, yeah, okay.
it's about
It's a story
Eurydice,
about Orpheus
and Eurydice.
yeah, it's and it's just great. I mean, I didn't see it on the stage, but this film was fantastic.
Have you seen Jean Cocteau's Orpheus? That's also, it'd be worth seeing it if you'd already seen the Hadestown.
Yeah.
I wanted to say another thing that I think our group could do, because I really liked hearing Alan's stories about how he got where he got in terms of this happened and then this happened and then this happened, and Otis too. And I realized I don't even know physically where some of you are. I don't know how you got, I don't know how you got there. I don't know what you did in between, but I find it really interesting. And so I would like people just to talk a little bit about what did you do? What have you been doing? What did you do this morning even? You know, that kind of stuff. I find that interesting.
You're assuming we know these things.
Well, we could make up a very interesting narrative that has nothing to do with reality.
That would be better. I see that Philby is here. You know, Philby owes us a session.
I want to hear about Philby's
summer solstice.
Yeah.
You know, 50 years of summer solstice.
And also, Tony, just so you'll know, in geriatric studies, they call it the tsunami of the baby boomers. And it's anybody born from 46 to 64. And it's supposed to have all these gigantic sociological implications. So it's sort of interesting to watch, you know, like, can you support with Social Security all these people who are going to show up and who are going to live way too long? And what is the government going to do to kill them off without making it obvious so they don't have to support them? Like maybe
tax the rich,
not okaying certain surgeries for people over a certain age and all of that stuff. So it's a real thing.
Well, that's a little darker than what I was hearing, but sure, yeah, some kind of supplement that just kills you before your time. I like it, like Soylent Green, except different. No, but I think you're right. I think this is an interesting group. I bet there's not a person here that wouldn't have an interesting life story to tell us. So I'd love that too. And Philby, since he won't give us an art lesson, would be a good candidate for that, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Ain't gonna happen.
What's that?
Ain't gonna happen.
Oh, come on. What do you, don't tell me you're shy. Okay, yeah, we're about quitting time, so I'll post this as usual, and next time, if nothing intervenes, McAtee and I will try to talk about music. I don't know how that's going to go, but we'll see.
Well, one thing is, I think we need to keep it going twice a week. We can't miss a session.
I agree.
Fair enough.
That was great, Otis. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Great, Otis. Thank you very much, and we will see you all next time.
See you on Thursday.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.